All right, we've got a good crew in here already. Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to the Cycling 74 Discord office hours. I'm very excited to be here this morning. I may be the afternoon or the evening for you, uh, and I'm very excited to have Gabor Lazar here. Uh, he was requested to bring into the Discord hours by a number of users. And Gabor has been on my radar for a long time. Uh, we just realized in the sound check we're actually label buddies, which is kind of funny. I think Gabor's first release was on Lorenzo Senni's Presto label, and we'll have a bit of a chat about that later. But I'm very excited. If you're unsure or unfamiliar with Gabor's work, he's hitting big wins right now. He's Here is his URL, and yeah, he's actually, interestingly, I put the lineup together for the Discord office hours and then realized there's all these intersecting connections between everyone afterwards. Gabor, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's go back to the start a little bit. I'm curious about firstly how you found Max, how that happened, like, because that's always a funny story. It's always very different for everyone. And then yeah, what led you to be on that first release with Presto?
Yeah, actually, that was the first album, not the first release.
Oh,
And the first release was a cassette, actually, with Russell Haswell. And that cassette was released by myself and by a friend of mine. But for the first album, yeah, it was like 10 or 11 tracks of Max MSP madness with some native instrument synthesizer together. How I end up using Max? Yeah, I got into the university on the southwest side of the country in a town called Page, and that was the place where I encountered with it. It's a media art kind of school with an electronic music interest as well, and that's how I met with the software, actually, which was yeah, it's a tough start, of course. Yeah, first time when I encountered with this white blank surface of a new patch, it's yeah, it was a little bit strange, but then step by step, it's like language. You uh, get words known and then try to make something with it.
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I also, in the last few years, I've thought about the process of learning Max. I'm always thinking about the process of learning Max, but I spent some time living in Japan, and I thought, and it was in that moment I realized, like, you only need to kind of learn 30, 40, 50 words and be able to, put a sentence together, and you can start to integrate. You can start to talk to other people in their language with just, a small amount of words, really. And Max is a little bit the same. There's 1,000 objects, 1,000 words or so. Uh, and yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because um, I didn't. So the way how I started to learn speaking English was actually very similar to how I started to learn maximum speed. Because I just picked up a few words and started to go abroad to travel, to play, and meet people who speaks English in their first language. And actually, it's a really intuitive way how I studied or learned speaking English, and maximum speed is kind of the same process. And it's not perfect. and it won't be never. But it's that's why it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a journey, and I mean, you never stop. You never stop. You never stop learning. Just you might even think you know an object. This happens to me regularly. You know one object really well, and then someone will be, "Oh, you know, there's an attribute that for that object that does this," and you're like, "Oh, yeah." Uh, so how did the Presto record come about? That I'm curious about. There was a very interesting thing happening in Europe. It felt to me in the late 2000s. There, a lot of some long term kind of more experimental labels were winding down, and there was this whole new group of there was like the Rasta spin-off. Um, and then there was Presto Records and Lorenzo Seni, coming into the forefront. Warp Records were also kind of like expanding their roster quite a bit with new artists. How did you meet Lorenzo, and how did that come about?
Well, actually, that's a pretty simple and basic story. That in our time, the only way to keep in touch with people was internet, and actually, that's how we got in touch first. But yeah, actually, he was offering this opportunity to make a CD for his record label. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that was the email and MySpace days, right? Like,
Exactly.
there was no social media. Because I think some of my first conversations with Lorenzo were through MySpace messaging, which is so funny now to think about. It's like organizing a record label through Instagram or something.
Yeah, maybe it's you can criticize this social media hype, and we need to, but the messaging part of it and keeping in touch with people is great. And anyway, if since the internet is there, it will be like this. So I'm not bothered by using these kind of platforms for keeping in touch with people.
Yeah, yeah. I quite, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but ultimately you're 100% correct there. Like, I really enjoy these connections that we're able to make, the people we can meet. And I mean, right here right now in the Discord is a great example of, there's a lot of, for me, there's a lot of familiar faces in here, a lot of folks I know. This is a place for us to all come and hang out in real time and chat. It's pretty cool. Um, and yeah, we get to talk to you. What's going on right now? I mean, you were kind of stuck in the pandemic. We were all stuck in the pandemic. You were changing things up a bit. You mentioned that you kind of took a break from Max for a moment, uh, and were working in Logic. Which records were those that you did in Logic?
Yeah. Um, Actually, since I started to use Max MSP at the university and started to make albums with it, a couple of long ones actually, I just got bored, and then I felt I need some kind of more intuitive uh, way of working and just a more simple way to make just good sounding club music.
Yeah.
And then I made Unfold and Source. Both of them were made in Logic, and in a very simple way, they are like 5 tracks in on top of each other. So it's very simple. And the idea was that to make some kind of let's say advanced club music um, with a very few elements, and trying to make it sound nice and in the spectral content. So that was the idea.
Right. And that was 2017 to 2020 roughly, right?
That was 2018.
Yeah.
and 2020 when the albums came out. Yeah, and then after that, of course, COVID came and it was a different situation. So I was like, okay, let's go back to this interface building approach. And yeah.
Yeah, and you told me you were quite excited after spending a minute in Logic, right? You were quite excited to get back to Max and build something afresh for your music to make your music and also perform it. Do you?
Yeah, but actually I spent like 3 or 4 years with making music in Logic as just a taking break away from Max. And actually I kind of not forgot things, but when I went back to Max, it felt a little bit new again, you know. And I had to kind of catch up with my memory, like how was it, you know, how to make this and that. And now, like 4 years later, having this kind of interface, which I already used for 2 other albums, I feel like that if I look back, I realize that this is a really inefficient interface made with a lot of mistakes, and it makes the computer so slow. It makes it, you know, so it's not a good job technically, but that was not the point to make a technically perfect thing.
Right.
The point was to just get lost in this kind of situation using the Maximus P and just as an output to use it as a creative platform.
Right. What was the? I don't want to make this a like Logic versus Max argument, but yeah, I'm kind of. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. What were the things that what you felt you could do in Max that you weren't kind of getting in Logic? Like, what were the things that excited you about being back inside of Max to build this quite epic interface and system?
I think it's on one hand, it's probably there's of course maybe it's not the best word, but it's also an emotional kind of emotionally a different way of working. Like if you just sit down with a logic, you have an idea and you just make it real, just intuitively.
Right.
As soon as you can, you just make a pattern, you just edit it, you just add different synths and chords and stuff like that. But with Max, you have to, I think you have to sit down and figure out the structure or figure out what the point of it, and then you make a prototype out of your idea, and then you start to work with it, and you realize that of course the output of the idea is not the same as the idea, and then you start to work around the output and you start to organize what you have, and you so it's many different levels on top of each other, and there's a progress, a technical progress, aesthetic progress, and it changes throughout the time.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're working on it. But working in Logic is more like 1 or 2 days of working on a track, and then when you finish it, you say like, okay, well done, and you leave or make a new track. But with Maximus P is more like long term. So you make environments, you make music making tools, you make kind of larger or long-term ideas, musical ideas, in the form of interface which can work for you on long time.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you open Logic in even Ableton Live for that matter, and there's an interface already. There's a grid that's kind of enticing you to put notes on, you know, quarter notes and sixteenths, and it's already kind of telling you in a way where to put stuff before you've even made a single click. But well, we all know what happens when you open a Max patch. You get a blank screen, and so yeah, you have to bring the ideas, the structure, uh, you were mentioning like the interface progress, the technical process. There's also like, I think for a lot of Max users, there's always a constant skill progress too. You never kind of stop learning new things about Max, and new ways of doing things. So then I always feel like there's this cyclical progress where you're reincorporating the new things all the time that you learn. Oh, I could do this better. I could do this better. This sounds better. This timing's better. Do you find that fun? Is that interesting?
Well, I think what motivates me is more like having an environment which is flexible, and just to make it flexible in a way that it can make me different results, but in the same time it could keep some kind of aesthetic uh, 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 aesthetic identity.
Right. Yeah, and what would you say your all gonna take a look at Gabor's interface shortly, but what would you say your interface approach is like for UI? Like, what are the elements that you're trying to have there in front of you for working at home on a record and also for performing live? It's the same interface, right, that you're using to record and also play live?
Yes, exactly. It's the same. Yeah. Um, well, honestly, I don't really have a list of preferences what I want to see on the interface side. It's more like just go with the flow and having different kind of ideas how I want to structure rhythmically or melodically or in whatever way the music. And then just, if I have a kind of idea that I want to control this or that, and then let's make a parameter for that and then just put it on the screen. So I don't really have any special like idea how should it look. I just,
Yeah.
one day I sit down and I have an idea like, okay, I wanna make this kind of new module for the interface, and then I make it and then somehow just organize it and implement it into the whole thing. So it's intuitive, I think.
Yeah, do you want to would you like to share let's have a look at your Max interface. This is the system that Gabor has built since 2020. He's been refining it. He has albums coming out this year, so that's very exciting. And that they will be on Rasta Media, right, Gabor?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got some releases coming, and this is the interface that he's used to. So, Gabor, if you wouldn't mind, could you just kind of take us through? I can kind of work a few sections out myself here, but like maybe start in the top left and just go across and down. I think some Max users here will be able to see it's sectionized out, but like what's going on in the different parts.
Yeah, sure. I think I just lost the window. Okay. So yeah, basically, I guess everybody knows these grids. These are the presets. And over here on the top left side, it's a very absolutely traditional step sequencer, which obviously could go in many different ways, back and forth and stuff like that. And below that, you can see the function display object. And this is like these days I would approach this idea in a different way, but back then I had this idea to somehow just draw curves and use the different points of the curve as a trigger. So when you play the function and when you draw something in a curve in the function and then you play it, you can set how long the function is, and then it will play through the corners of the ramps or the ramps of the curve. So it will create some kind of pattern without using the sequencer.
So you're playing the segment points on the function.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah. And there's a way in the sequencer when I can play the traditional sequencer, of course, maybe in a chaotic way, and then I can set the sequencer to stop at some point and switch to the function, and then so in this way I'm able to combine traditional rhythmic structures and abstract rhythmic structures made with the function object. So I like that idea because I like to play or kind of interact with people's memory about different kind of music. So like just having different traditional rhythms and then just switch from that to some kind of abstract stuff and switch back to traditional rhythms and do it back and forth. And then this is like when you feel that you feel the rhythm, and then you at the next moment you got disappointed because something else will come in, and then but if you keep to listen to this kind of changes, you will realize that there's a repetition in it, because the way how it switches back and forth between traditional or abstract rhythmic structures, you realize that it's a structure. So it's not randomly doing it, but there's a repetition in the way how the non-repetition working.
Yeah, so there's like conflict, and you're having these resolves and letting it resolve, and then letting people get comfortable, and then creating kind of almost a conflict and then resolve. How are you changing the how are you changing you're switching the settings of function? Are you morphing, or are you changing the preset setting?
Do you mean how I switch between these two?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a module here on the top right side, it's called alternate. So I can set how many curves and how many classic rhythmic structures are being played. And also there's a third one, which is called micro. And this is the micro.
Okay.
And it's, of course, these are stupid nicknames, but actually what it does is it modulates the metro object of the traditional sequencer. So this is actually what I'm drawing here is the time, is argument of the metro, the millisecond. And so if I draw like this, then it will just increase or decrease the millisecond interval between the steps of the sequencer. And also the upper one controls the first and the third track. The lower one controls the second and the fourth.
Okay.
So they are not in synchron actually, and also you can set the panorama respectively, so you will get a really nice result in temporal and spatial term.
Yeah, I love that you're playing with the micro timing and shifting stuff by small amounts of milliseconds. I think there's something that's a fascinating area of sound to play with, and to kind of, like you mentioned, the audience's memory, or the listener's memory, or like how we are not sure of those. We don't always associate, or we don't always find those micro movements immediately. They come later. It's like subconsciously they come first, and then we become conscious of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I call it like maybe someone else call it the same way, but I like to think about it like your memory is creating a map of the music. So not a score, but like a map, which is more like has more dimensions than a score, probably.
Right. Yeah, it always makes me that strangely reminds me of techno, where you're listening to a really, traditional kind of old school techno track that's quite, well, seems quite repetitive, and then 3, 4, 5 minutes later, you realize the snare drum or the hi hat is subtly changed. But really, it's been changing the whole time. It's just that your consciousness is caught up to the change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is awesome. Very cool. You've got in terms of the preset object here, I'm going to presume that's using patter. Is that right? Or
No, I don't use pattern storage
oh,
and any of that because
okay,
it's as I told you at the time when I jumped back to Maximum SP, I was
yeah,
like a starter again, a beginner, like
right.
so. Yeah, that's the reason why actually I thought I should start a new interface. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I started to kind of recreate this patch
Mm.
in a more efficient way. And also, I have other ideas which I would like to integrate. Because this patch is actually of course, for some people, it looks like very professional, but it's not. So, but it's
Wow.
great. It's great. And if someone heard the album called Boundary Object, it's made with this one. So I think it's not making something. It's not about like how can you technically do something, but like just do it.
I mean, again, this is Max, so it doesn't really matter if it's if your interface is efficient or professional or unprofessional. Like, we were looking for results here, and you are delivering the results. So, you know, um, it's also quite funny to me. I mean, every Max user says, "Oh, it's not finished," or "It's not," you know, it's. I'd probably be dubious of a Max user I met who said it's the perfect interface. It's it's finished. I'd probably be like, "Who are you? Are you? Who are you?" um, yeah. So what's going on down here in the bottom? I could see there's three sections. I see open plug. Oh, there's a little more. I'm not seeing. Yeah, there's these three kind of sections here. Open plug. There's a couple of more 3 multi sliders per the section
Yeah,
there.
these are actually VST uh, modules where I can load a VST. I work with Native Instruments stuff. I really like it, and but I could load any VST here. So these are actually just control parameters for the synthesizer, and these numbers here are the IDs, the ID numbers of the parameter of the synthesizer which I would like to control. So
Mm.
I just have three three of this multi-slider, and I have three of these whatever objects, but actually I can connect them to any parameter of the synthesizer. But of course, for one track, I could use just three of these and three of these and four of these, but that's far enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
So you've got, are you often using three different synths in like plugins loaded in those sections, or sometimes just one, or does it vary?
Most of the times I use like about two VSTs and maybe sometimes three VSTs for one track, because actually if I start to play with the techniques what these different modules and sequencers could do, it could go a little bit chaotic easily. So I like to keep the spectral elements on the minimum, just to leave space for the temporal events of the music. So that's the same thing like with the club music I done. Like what interests me in music, of course, among many other interests, is that they just leave space for quiet moments. Is the contrast what I like between having no sound and having sound is it's a pleasure to have the sound and have no sound at all. So in this way, I like to work with a very few sounds. So this sequencer has just 4 tracks, and just have 3 VSTs. So most of the times I don't even use all of these.
And I mean, this is quite interesting because Mark talks about it. Mark Feld talks about it a little bit, like, and it came up when we talked to Mark. Like, what kind of sound design are you doing on the plugin side? Are you building out some, custom FM algorithms with FM8, or, are you just looking for a sound that seems to fit the rhythm the best?
Oh no, it's actually I'm using the same synthesizer since a couple of years from Native Instruments. For my first albums, which came out on Lorenzo Sen's label and on Boomcat and on Shelter Press, and all of these albums were made with this synthesizer called Laser Bass, which is an additive synthesizer. And the idea of those albums were like just using that only one synthesizer with a Max MSP interface together. And since the synthesizer is monophonic, I had this kind of idea that, okay, I'm not going to change the note. I'm not going to change the pitch of what I am playing on the synthesizer. So it's the whole album was made on one pitch. So no pitches were changed. And I think that's interesting technically, because with an additive synthesizer, you can go crazy with the spectral content.
Right.
And you don't need to change the pitch, because you are actually able to change the spectral content with different parameters of the synthesizer, and you don't need really to change the pitch. Of course, that would add more changes and more. It would create a different situation in the spectral content. But here comes the aesthetic vision that is a challenge to me to use just one note and create something which is interesting or even sounds nice, like even if it's not it's not a melody or it's not a harmony, but it's just, and then try to create some kind of aesthetic system or create some kind of identity for the music, and then you just achieve this with the less possible elements and possibly less fewer changes maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
For those albums, I used that synthesizer, and then for boundary object, I'm using the Razor from Native Instruments. It's this one. Of course, there's an EQ. But actually, I'm using this only for this kind of dub or techno chords, what you have probably heard on boundary object. Yeah. So you could use any synthesizer to achieve what you want. Actually, for that kind of sound, it would be enough to use just two oscillators and some subtractive filter or yeah.
What was the record you said you were not using any pitches and only changing the spectral content?
That was ILS, for instance, which came out on Presto.
ILS on Presto Records.
Yeah, and also Crisis of Representation on Shatterpress. Also EP 16, which is actually it's EP 1 and 6 because it's just 6 tracks. So I had the idea to start a series of EPs and then just name them as the track numbers. But just only one EP came out, so it just stopped there. But actually, everything I released before Unfold was made on one note, on one pitch. So there's no, it's like 3 albums maybe.
Nice. And you're only working, you're only working with soft synths, right? Like you're not, is there any hardware involved?
Well, for Unfold and for Source, I used the synthesizer called Nordrack 2X. But actually, I just used it for pads and leads because it sounds really nice. And but I'm not fanatically collecting any hardwares.
Honestly, I mean, yeah, I commend you. I mean, we live in a world of abundance now. I mean, just even the world of free plugins and soft synthesizers like Vital and stuff like that's phenomenal now when you consider the quality of these. And it's enticing to just throw more things at the wall, but I honestly feel like there's a when you get back to your own conceptual rationale and interests and stylistically follow those, perhaps the results I think are better.
Yeah, you just mentioned quality of sound. That's interesting because there isn't any good or bad sounding stuff. So everything sounds in a way that it sounds, and then you can do whatever you want with it. So like software or hardware, this is always a conflict maybe. But I think it could sound really nice when you use a tiny digital synthesizer and make some crap sound with it. So I like that kind of approach that use the most simple and most easily made tools. Like if you look at black metal, that's how it started.
Right.
They just use the possibly worst equipment what they could get. Or if you look at techno music, that's how it started, like cheap drum machines and cheap synthesizers.
Right.
So, and it still sounds like techno music. It still sounds actually bad, but we consider it good because it's depends on. So it's like your brain. It makes sound nice to you because it's dirty, but actually it doesn't sound nice. But I like it. So that's how quality is. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think what it meant by quality, I guess, was that we're getting these professional products like Vital. I think is a great example that we now get for free. But yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think I always liken music and quality to the digital camera era. Like late 90s, early 2000s, we got the first kind of digital cameras, and they were 1 megapixel, and you couldn't see you couldn't even tell if there was a person in there because the quality of the photo was so bad. And now we have phones 20 years later that have 50 megapixels, and now we have products that you know degrade the photo so that it looks like an old photo, or it looks like, and it's kind of hilarious to me because there was a whole period where a product that degrades the photo would not have made any sense, and everyone would have been like, why do I want that? But yeah, now we're trying to make everything look old.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
kind of the same in audio, like the amount of lo-fi guitar pedals out there on the market cracks me up.
Nostalgia, yeah.
Black metal is I do you listen to black metal?
Well, yeah, I like it. Yeah.
There you go, folks. Gabor likes black metal. Yeah, I mean, the whole rise of black metal into the more kind of, I wouldn't say it's mainstream by any means yet, but it's certainly the general consciousness of a lot of music listeners. It's certainly become more prevalent in the last decade and a half or so. Yeah, it's quite interesting to me, and it is a fascinating world of sound, actually.
Yeah, I think the whole subculture of black metal has its own aesthetic territory, which is interesting, and it's actually a quite new kind of style or genre. But actually, the reason why I have some kind of interest in this is that this band called Mayhem, and the singer of Mayhem is a Hungarian guy, and yeah, I just like the story how he ended up being part of that movement, and also they were Attila Csihar, the person, and yeah, they were already doing really nice, interesting black metal cassettes in the 80s in Budapest. So yeah.
Yeah, you were definitely living in black metal territory there. I guess if you were, it's like yeah, that makes sense. It would be like living in Berlin and not being aware of techno, right? I mean, of course you're aware of black metal. It's interesting because the subculture of black metal really reminds me of that kind of early, and I don't know this, I wasn't so aware of techno in its in its inception, but like it feels like there's this similar underground subculture in a sense. Very different types of music, but
yeah, there's a lot of connection between them. Like in techno, there's this white label culture, when you don't put the name of the artist on the record.
Yeah.
And quite similar in black metal that, of course, they were like a little bit narcissist. Like they were like, okay, this is my music, we are the band, blah blah blah. But if you take a look more deeper, you realize that there is a similar way. Like most of the bands were like doing it for the community and not doing for themselves to create a successful band or whatever, but they were just doing it as part of a community.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think probably bands like Sun have because they did work with Mayhem, or there's a crossover into the drone music scene, and yeah, that's fascinating. Like, very cool. We're getting some cool questions in here. There's one here from Bariski. Do you think that it's possible to go out of the grid completely if you want to stay in the frame, within the frame of club music? Or does using chaotic temporal events and traditional grooves together is the only way to do it?
Of course, the proper answer, what I have to say now is that I don't know, because who could answer this? Nobody, probably.
Right.
If I would say I know the answer, that would not be nice. But what I think is that there is nothing wrong with club music, and on the other side, there's nothing wrong with such a music which is not like club music, but like let's say innovative electronic music which goes out of the traditional timings. It's there's a place for everything. So I think combining them, it's a good idea because it brings questions, and that's nice.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't say that this one should not exist or that should not exist, or this is good or this is bad. I think everything has its own purpose in this culture. So we wouldn't be able to talk about this kind of thing if there would have not been techno or these things.
Right. That's a very good point. I recently had to do a presentation, and I showed.
And also, the truth is that actually, I was DJing a lot, and I'm still DJing when my friends invite in Budapest. So I'm not against anything. It's like I had this kind of need to go beyond these kinds of already institutionalized timings or whatever,
Completely agree. I think a lot of people probably here right now would agree. Staying on the grid and being restricted or inside of the grid, you kind of start to feel trapped, perhaps. And yeah, I like to go in and out of it. Some people, if you think about some ambient and drone artists, they're very anti-grid. That's probably the antithesis of anti-grid. The follow-up, the last part of that question is very interesting to me, because I think about this myself sometimes. But like, do you have any intention? Are you to make the audience dance, or do you just completely not care? It's a funny question, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot by asking this. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it either. But like, what do you think about in terms of that? Like, what's the ideal audience do? Or
I
you
don't know
just
if there is an ideal audience at all, but
true.
um, the only thing what I could talk about is in like I don't want to, and I cannot really make an opinion about other people. So the only thing what I can say is how I behave in a club. So what I do, I just stand and watch. So I don't dance at all.
Mm.
Of course, like there were occasions when we were really drunk and young and like we just went crazy. But most of the times I try to understand and just experience what's going on in a club and how the music sounds and just to encounter with the physical part of the sound and you know when you go to a club or a concert or a festival anything like that you will get such a sound system which is pretty nice. So
Right.
it's amazing to listen music at home on a near field studio monitor because you can get the details. But when you go out and when you go to to a venue and you get loud sounding amplifiers or speakers, you will actually feel the physical part of the sound, which is nice. And also this kind of social environment when people go crazy and people just get lost in this situation is also really interesting to see. So yeah, my approach to being in a club is like that. But actually, the other approach is playing. So I DJ'd a lot, honestly, and I really like to be on the other side of the desk and create this kind of environment for people when they can encounter with the physicality of sound and encounter with this social situation and somehow just put musical references on and trying to see what's happening.
Yeah, you've just made me blatantly aware of what a terrible audience member I am when I go to the club. I go and stand in the sweet spot and I just stand there and I'm just listening. I'm not moving at all.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I did go to Treza one time and I was aware of what a bad audience member I was because people were looking at me like, why are you dancing? I was equally parts fascinated to be there and just take in the architecture and the space, and then equally parts like just listening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Uh, wow. Someone was asking, like, is there any like post FX that is going on in this patch? Like, is there something here that we can't see that you're running all of this through? Like, um,
No, there is no effects or any effect chain. The only effect I use is the reverb on the synthesizer.
right.
But I use that quite a lot in boundary objects. But nothing. I like to keep the mix down really clear
Mm,
and not saturated by any effects. Because I realized that when I did that on the club music project, I realized that it's very easy to overuse the effects. And when you finish a track and you do the mix down, you realize that you have to pull back because, as I said, I really like to keep the spectral content clear, and I
mm,
really like keep keep just space for quiet moments, and that's why I actually I don't like long reverbs and stuff like that, because that makes it muddy. It makes it connects the sounds together. I don't want to connect the sounds together. I want to hear the silence, the quiet part between this micro moment, before a kick drum, or micro moment before the clap sound. So that's why I'm not using any long reverbs or anything like that.
Right. That's very interesting. We have a question here from Udo. In terms of the crisis of representation, are you then exemplarily applying comb filtering techniques when solely focusing on spectral components, or more just the constellation of added harmonics?
Yeah, it's only the additive kind of stuff. So there are no, of course, there's a filter on the synthesizer, but it's not a traditional filter, because it's called the synthesizer. It's like it has something like a filter, but it's not a filter. But it just takes spectral content out on. So it is same what the filter does, of course, but when you put a filter on something, then the input signal includes that kind of that sound, that spectral content, and the filter removes it. But this synthesizer was made in a way which is a genius synthesizer. So it was made in a way that it doesn't produce the sound when you put the filter on. So the way how it doesn't remove or doesn't filter out that spectral content, but it actually doesn't create it.
Right.
And that's it's very precise and very clinical,
Wow. Yeah, that's very cool. I like that you're not kind of glossing over your sounds with extra effects or spectral manipulation, that you're letting the original sound really shine. That seems really important here. Another question that's kind of similar but slightly different, like what techniques are you using for percussion, or do you see a distinction between percussive and harmonic elements in your music?
I don't really understand the question.
I guess it's like, do you consider, let me see if I can frame this a little differently. Like, do you consider the say the synth stabs, are you considering them as percussive elements, or are they the harmonic? Are you, in your mind, are you splitting up the kick drum is completely separate of any of the percussive stuff, the harmonic elements?
Yeah, I see. I think since if you listen to Unfold, the album, you will realize that the synthesizer sounds and the kick drum are always, or most of the times, are connected together. So well, I think I just use in for the club music context, I think I just use synthesizer and percussive sounds in a very similar way as any musician would do. So it sounds really nice when you put a synthesizer, a lead or a chord on a kick drum, and when they are together, it sounds really nice because the kick drum starts a pad or a chord or anything like that, and it sounds nice. And again, I like to keep some space for quiet moments. So that's if I compose music in a way that that the percussive sounds creating the structure, and then I put a second level on it as in the form of synthesizers and chords and stuff like that. then it could easily go that way. Like, okay, kick drum and synthesizer sound would come in together, and then there would be some space for quiet moments. And so I like this kind of way of working if it's club music. But it's similar in Maxim SP, because the way how the interface works is that the way how I trigger the synthesizer is, it's of course it's coming from the sequencers. So I can select which track would trigger which synthesizer and which track would stop the MIDI note. And let's say like track one would start a chord on VST3, and then track 2 would stop VST3. But the first track would be the kick drum, let's say, and the second track would be the clap sound, let's say. So the kick drum starts the synth and the clap sound stops the synth. So this is a very quick way of creating patterns and connect the rhythmic structure with the synthesizer. And it's I can switch in and out from different sources, and it's like a, of course it's like a modular synthesizer, which I have never used actually, but yeah, I guess it's similar.
Yeah, so there really is a symbiotic relationship there between the harmonic and percussive elements, and I guess for the listener that's going to meld and vary from time to time. There's another good question here. How do you approach time bending gate generations for the less grid based sections?
So the question is about how I create nonlinear patterns.
Yeah.
Well, it's this with this interface object. Actually, there are infinite ways of doing that, and just my way, as I made for this interface 4 years ago, was the function object, but it's a really bad technique, actually. So it's of course you can say it's nice, but after making very a lot of music with this, I realized that this is not the best idea, and not a technically not a good way of making nonlinear stuff. Because of course, if you create lists in Maxim SP, it's much more clean way of doing things. At that time, I was thinking from the interface side, so I was thinking about which interface object is the best to somehow draw something and then play what I draw.
Right.
And that's how I came up with the idea of this function object. But there are probably better ways of doing nonlinear.
I can't say I've struck someone else using the function. I mean, function is one of those objects that's almost in everyone's max patch, and it's right there with multi-slider. And I can't say I've struck someone that's been sequencing the segment points of the function object, like segment by segment. I think it's quite interesting. Hard to say about efficiency. I mean, efficiencies are something that I think as a Max user, when you're starting off, you have no idea about how to even create them. And then when you get to a more complex setup, then you're trying to reverse it up a little bit to find the efficiencies. I can't even speak to how whether that's efficient or not. My ethos is if it works and it sounds good, then it's fine. If it works and Max doesn't crash and your system doesn't crash, yeah. Someone wants to see the patch unlocked, Gabor. I don't know if you're comfortable doing that or not. It is rather. Oh, there we go. He's comfortable. So it's quite vast. We're not able to play it because Gabor's it will bring the call down. Well, not me, but will likely bring the call down for Gabor. It's quite. You can see there's a lot happening here.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's technically it's really bad. So
It seems
what
to me like here you definitely still have it sectionized, right? Like you've got your different parts that are sectioned out, and
yeah. But actually, there's this object called bpatcher.
yes.
If I would be a professional, then I would do it like I would just do one module or one section, and I would just make it as I want and put it into a bpatcher and just duplicate it, and then you will have it easily. But I don't know. I think it's a personality question. Like I just prefer to keep it in this layout and have everything accessible at the moment. And if I just want to change it, just go there and change things. And I know different ways how I could make it more quickly or more efficiently, but this way, working this way, it's more flexible for me. More chaotic, but more flexible.
I
Because
do not
everything.
see. Yeah. Here's the beauty, and I think this is why a lot of us are here in Max, is because the beauty of Max is that you can make it work to your standard. You can make Max work to your personality. You can make Max, so there's no right or wrong way because there's about 50 different ways of doing any one thing in Max. And I absolutely love that. I almost never see someone have the exact same Max patch. I mean, it's great. You can work it to the way you want. There's an interesting question here, like how reliable is this for you? I feel like it's reliable, right? You play it live, and has it ever crashed for you in a live setup?
No, surprisingly, never.
Do you run a redundancy? Do you have any redundancy when you play live?
No, I don't.
There you go, folks. Yeah, I think that's a testament to your programming then. Yeah, it's interesting, like the concept of redundancy, and I've been thinking about it a little bit since Grimes had a meltdown uh, at Coachella the other weekend, and there was no redundancy. Gabor, are you able to just share your video? Actually, just your not the screenshot.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I wonder how many people are even bothering with redundancy these days because, computers have definitely become a lot more reliable in the last 10, 15 years. I do remember early in the 2000s, it was difficult at times.
Yeah. But if it happens, it happens. So I've never been frustrated. So,
Yeah.
the stories like when Panasonic have played somewhere and just the electricity went off and the whole show just stopped. So of course it could make uncomfortable situations, but like after 10 years or 20 years, people talk about it. So
Yeah.
if it will happen if it wants to happen. So you cannot do anything against this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think
That's
it's a personal choice too. Like, someone actually here is just Ned Rush is in here just asking like, what do I mean by redundancy? And it's like a lot of artists will run a second laptop and have it synchronized, and so if one laptop crashes, it automatically switches to the other machine. I think Auteka might do that. I'm not actually sure. Someone actually says Tim Hecker, and I actually can. I did play with Tim Hecker a long time ago, 2007 or something. And I saw Tim would have a shortwave radio running into his audio interface. And so that if his laptop crashed, he could just switch to the shortwave radio and would just blast people with noise.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's a personal choice. And some people like the risk, that's the thing. Like, ultimately playing live with a computer with these electronic devices, we all know at the end of the day, we could just build an interface that doesn't even do anything, and we could have a track that's just playing back for 45 minutes, and would anyone else know? No. So it's like, what kind of level of risk are you comfortable with? And I need some risk there. It's not for me personally playing live with no risk. It's not interesting.
yeah, yeah. Risk is nice. I think it creates a, a motivation. Like it's the same when you if we think about composition, it is also about taking risk, just touching those territories which actually could make something make the situation unbalanced, but then go back to balanced situations. So yeah, I like to kind of take risk. And the other thing is that I never practice at home. Like, yeah,
Wow.
with Boundary Object, I started to play abroad with this interface when Boundary Object came out. And I started at Budapest
Mm.
and then went to different places in Europe and New York and Montreal. And also, and then back to Europe. And then at the last show of that year, when I played in Poland, that was really nice. And I was like, okay, this is how it should have been like for the whole tour. Because that was the, I don't know, 12th a show or something like that. And, you know, when you play like every month, that's actually practicing, going, playing live. So I never play at home. I just
Yeah.
make the patch for the album, and then when there's a performance, it's the reality. So that's risk. That's
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
risk. Yeah.
Wow.
I like because that's the only way how you can be honest to yourself is
Right.
that when you get a feedback of what you are doing. Because if you would prepare everything like properly in a way like if you would not have if you would not leave um, chance to make a mistake, then it's how could it be interesting for you to stand there and just technically saying just pressing a button, you know,
Right.
and if you would know every bit of the music what's going to happen in the next moment. Of course I have a structure, of course I have a kind of score what I want to do,
Right.
but in between these uh, tracks I go different ways, and that's the point where when I hear on a loud audio system what I am doing, and that's the point when I hear that is it really sounding good? Like,
Mm.
you know, when you make the music at home, you make a mix down for these studio speakers, and then when you take it out to a festival or a club, you gonna hear how is it sounding a real situation.
Yeah.
And so this is how I like to get a feedback how does it sound and what it does. And when you are on stage, of course, there's a kind of normal adrenaline situation, and then at the same time you get a feedback from your work,
Right.
and then you try different things. Of course, you take risks, and then it creates an amazing situation. What I really like.
Yeah, and I guess because you are using the same system to make the music as home as the system that you use to play live. So you don't, it's not like you need to run through your set and test if it works. You already know that it works because you're recording from it. And that, yeah, I can see how that makes it completely exciting to take out and then put it in a live music scenario and run through it. Like it's like you could rehearse it to death, but then it would become boring.
Yeah.
It's like,
And with the techniques I use, actually, you can recognize the tracks when I start to play around with the settings, but on the micro level, I cannot do the same rhythmic stuff,
right.
or the same melody or the same stuff. So it doesn't make any sense to practice, actually.
Yeah, this has sparked a flurry of comments here about incorporating risk into your into everyone's performance. It's interesting. Like there's a human element of us that I think subconsciously we want to avoid risk at times as humans. Like we try to be safe, we try to live somewhere safe, we try to be safe when we go outside in the world, but like too much safety, as we all know, also like can be boring, right? Like we don't want to wrap ourselves in cotton wool. Um, there's another question here. Will there be a sequel to the collab album on Death of Rave?
Sorry again?
Will there be a sequel to the collaboration album on Death of Rave?
What do you mean by that?
Well, is there is there going to be a follow-up album to it, or can you?
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean the other question there is like, can you share a little bit? Like, what was it like to work with Mark? What was your process there? Did you guys send files back and forth? Did you get in a room together? Was it virtual? Was it in person?
yeah, Mark visited Budapest in 2014 when I invited him to play. But yeah, we were changing emails since, I don't know, before that time, since like 2 years before that. And yeah, at some day he just emailed that he's going to play in Bratislava, and how about if I would go there to meet? And I was like, I'm not going there. You will come to Budapest to play, and I will try to get you an opportunity. And it would be nice if you would be able to play in Budapest. And yeah, he came, he performed, and then he spent 5 days in Budapest, and we recorded the album in 3 days.
3 days. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. But
Would
of
you?
course, there was of course a post-editing session which we done through internet, but actually that's just cutting the recording, just
Yeah.
like we have this kind of 15 minutes of this track, let's just cut it down to 5 minutes or whatever.
Wow. Were you did you like have your system and he had his and you were just synchronizing and just throwing stuff around, like, or was there any kind of max patch editing or?
Yeah, actually it was just like you said, he had his interface, I had my interface, we connected it through OSC, and just used it in many different ways and many different dynamics.
That's fun. That sounds fun. That just sounds like
But
fun.
album was for us as well. It was like, let's take a listen how it sounds and then just keep the recording on.
Yeah.
You know. So we weren't planning to make an album together. It was just randomly happened.
That's cool. How many cups of tea did you and Mark drink? I'm serious. He loves his tea, I know that.
Yeah. Actually, I'm a tea lover as well. Yeah.
See, I had a feeling. There was like, this album was at least 20 cups of tea.
Yeah, we had a fruit tea actually. You know, when you put tea into just cold water and leave it in the fridge for a night or something.
Yeah. Super refreshing.
Yeah.
What's your favorite tea, Gabor?
Well, actually, I'm not such a crazy tea lover. Like, I'm not technically going into the details as much as into XNSP, but yeah, just drinking green tea from the local shop. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Nice. Someone just asked, and we also had Joshua Eustace, Telefon Tel Aviv, and someone was like, what's your relationship with Telefon Tel Aviv? You guys are friends. How did you guys become connected? Was it just randomly, email, like?
Well, how did we meet first? I don't know, but yeah, actually, the of course it was through internet. I don't know at which year was it, maybe 2016 or early. I just started to change messages with Josh, and then at some festival we have met, and then they also played in Budapest, and we played together at in Berlin and Berghain. So yeah, it was just like organically happening. I really like Second Woman project, what they did together with Turk. It's really nice.
Yes. Yeah, I just when I think of you and Josh, I just remember some picture that he posted on Instagram as you guys both with a beer at a picnic table. I don't know.
That was in, yeah.
Because you know, Josh doesn't post a lot of pictures on Instagram, so it just kind of stands out when he does post a picture, and especially one where he's just hanging out and it was you two having a beer, and I was like, oh, that would be a pretty fun picnic table to be at right now.
Actually, that was down the park here.
Nice.
Just 100 meters away from here.
All right. Awesome. Gabor, I always ask everyone that we get on here, you know, a couple of things that always seem to come up with Max users. Gaming. Do you play video games? Are you interested in video games?
No.
Nope.
I'm not interested in video games.
Not a
Absolutely
gamer?
not. No,
Yeah.
no, I don't like it. I mean, I like the how the games are structured, and I like the strategy what the players have to apply, and it's interesting. But as a teenager, I never played with a computer game like, you know, like those friends of mine who did. I'm a really how is it called when someone actually a handy guy, you know, when you like to do things in practice. And I was not hyperactive, but I really enjoyed being outside and just socializing.
Yeah.
You know, when I was really young, like 8 or 9 or 10 years old, we used to live in this district in Budapest, which is this typical socialist panel district area. And of course, this area is not super nice if you think about your future, but it was really nice as a child, because there were a lot of other guys outside, and in a social way, it was really nice to experience social interactions as a very young person.
Right.
Instead of, playing games at home. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happens. Like I certainly in the late childhood we got a Game Boy. I'm dating myself now, but I was interested in the Game Boy, but then after a while we lived on a large farm property in Tasmania, and I got a little motorbike, and the rest is history. Like I was infinitely more interested in taking the motorbike and riding around in the forest and exploring. I mean, it was in a sense like a video game, but it was real life, and I was like out there with the dogs and the animals and whatever. Yeah, how about books? Any books that you're reading right now, or
actually that's the same answer would easily apply on this question. That I don't really I cannot really keep my attention on the same thing for a long time.
right?
So reading is not my format.
Yeah,
honestly. Of
yeah,
course, I read, of course, but I prefer those texts which just which has a purpose,
right.
like just telling something. I don't really like when there's a long story about something, fiction or like that,
Right. Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, I would say I don't read a lot of fiction, very little, in fact. I'm much more into I'm like reading manuals and technical books. Something that has a purpose. Usually, I'm fascinated in stuff that concepts or creative stuff that can be applied to creativity and areas of interest. Yeah. I want to ask you about your images, that you uh that you perform with. Is that pre-composed? Is it also being generated in real time in Jitter, or
yeah, those are that visual is programmed by a friend of mine. It's programmed in C++. I guess he's using open frameworks.
yeah.
And yeah, it's just a new collaboration between us. And yeah, it's running real time and it gets triggers and messages from my Max patch. So it's a kind of visual framework what we have developed together. And it's a flexible system also. So I want someone to work together with to create a visual framework which I could use later on as well, not just for one project, but for just having it as a standalone software actually, which has some parameter channels as inputs, and later on I could use it for multiple albums or multiple different situations.
Right. Yeah, so you're sending OSC messages from Max to him, or yeah.
Yeah, from MaxMSP, I have a separate MaxMSP patch for composing the visual things, and then it is being sent to the other software, which is just running there and waiting for the information.
Right. And is he, when you perform, is he at the show? Like, are they running the visuals from like front of house and you're sending it wirelessly across, or?
No. It's just the software.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technically, for some of the shows, what I done in December last year, I had two computers, but it's just a technical situation. We will manage to just have it as a standalone software and make it possible to run it on one computer. So
nice.
It's just in progress.
Right. So in terms of playing live, you're using one machine to do both sound and visuals, an audio interface. Is there any kind of controller, any kind of MIDI controller that you're using?
I could have, but I'm not sure if it would make it more interesting.
Right.
So again, the risk factor that if you have just the trackpad, it's interesting what you can do with it, because it's limited, and it's really nice to use the limitation as a as an instrument. So I for the club music performances, I did use the external MIDI keyboards and controllers, because I used a lot of effects and different not effects like in Ableton, because that was Ableton for the performance. For the club music, there are different functions, and I use the controller to control different functions.
Right.
But for Max MSP performances, I really like to use just the trackpad and maybe the keyboard. So you can connect anything to your computer keyboard. Why would you have a controller? Actually, it's just like creating the belief that you are such a important composer that you need hundreds of instruments and gear and controllers around you. But actually, the reality is that you don't need.
Yeah, but it's true.
If you enjoy to use these kinds of MIDI controllers and gear, of course, let's go for it. But I just like to keep my backpack light,
Keep the backpack light. Yes, I'm a big fan of keeping the backpack light. Minimal amount of gear in the backpack, because as you're on tour, somehow, no matter, you're not putting anything more in the backpack, but the longer you're on tour, the backpack seems to get heavier as you get tireder. And it is an interesting, that is a very interesting thing to consider, is like, yeah, I mean, the mouse can do, the trackpad can go anywhere. And I've always had this dilemma. I, of course, use controllers and stuff here and there, but like, trying to decide what parameters, when you have many parameters that can be changed in a patch, what makes it to the controller? Because the controller never has enough. It never can cover every parameter, and that's a dilemma.
Yeah, sometimes, but actually I like to control the rhythmic part of it, because the spectral part is changing so fast that, I mean, the rhythmic structure, I think it's more interesting to control with hand, with like just giving instructions and change the outcome of the situation, or interact with the situation. If I would do this for the spectral part, like with the filter and all kinds of things like that, I think it's just not interesting for me. Because actually, the way how the Max MSP patch is organized, it has a structure. So everything that happens on the spectral and the temporal part it has a causality, so well, I don't know, I just don't like to play around with the spectral things. I like just to control the sequencer, and everything else is gonna be the result of that.
Completely, yeah. again, it's like that personal choice. I mean, I have had my personal dilemma with MIDI controllers over the years. Um, and I realized, like, oh, I'm compromising a lot of things. I'm compromising my patch here by trying to force it to be, you know, applied to these 16 encoders that I have. Um, Again, I think that's why we're here. That's why we like Max, that fluid, limitless possibilities. Uh, Gabor, we might wrap up here shortly, folks. If anyone has any last questions for Gabor, while we have him here, there was a question here. What are you? I guess this is a. I'm not sure. This. What do you want to achieve with your upcoming album, especially compared to Boundary Objects? Tricky question. I guess I could say I'll add to it. Like, is it a continuation of, something that you've explored, or do you see it as a new kind of a new beginning or departure from the past?
So yeah, actually, every album is a continuation of the previous one, but the reality is that these albums are so the truth is that I'm of course I have an interest, and then let's say, okay, for the next 2 years I want to do this, next 2 years I want to do that. But the reason why I have this kind of decision, what I want to do for the next 2 years, is actually part of the weekday life situation. So what kind of environment I have at the moment, and what is possible for me to do. So just like everybody else, I have to consider what could work together with my life. So it's not like, okay, I want to do this kind of album and my life will make it happen. But on the other side, I sometimes, or most of the times, I kind of inspired by how my life is happening, and then just do what I can do. So not
Yeah. Someone
but
asked.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I can't wait to hear it. I'm looking forward to it. Someone asked here, like, what's your? I always find this interesting. Like, what's your daily routine practice like? Like, are you? But like, are you? Do you wake up in the day and some people are morning people. They have to do all their creativity in the morning. They can't work in the evening. Some people cannot do any creativity in the day and only work in the late night. What's your process kind of like for?
Yeah. Strangely, in my 20s, I've been working for like midnight or even longer. And that was the time when I was able to focus. But I don't know, these days it's more like from the morning or from the middle of the day. Somehow it changed. I don't know. But yeah, actually, it's sometimes it's difficult to work.
Yeah, there's a lot of distractions in the world. Just from immediate friends and family, social media to the world news and politics, and sometimes focusing and just being distraction free, but also having the motivation creatively. It
Yeah,
can't.
exactly.
I think I can't speak for everyone. I know as I've gotten older, I've been able to hone in on where my more productive times are, and I try to ensure that they're protected. But it's
Yeah.
not always possible, like you said. Life around, right? Like it influences things. You have other commitments where we can't. It would be great if we could ignore everything, including the the bills. But yeah. Someone asked, like, what's your favorite object in Max? Is there a particular object you're just like, oh, that's my favorite? Nope, none.
I don't have any.
All right, there you go, folks. No favorite objects in Max. Max itself. Well, Gabor, yeah, that's pretty much it for questions. Or one more here. Like, do you have any advice for someone getting into Max? Like, what would be something you would say? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I just realized that as I said, I started to get known Maxim SP when I got into the university, but of course there were courses and they were trying to teach us, but quickly I had to realize that if I don't take over the thing for myself, so if I don't study it or learn it for myself in my free time, then probably not going to be enough what the university is teaching. So so I think I'd like 90 or 80% of what Maxim SP is actually what you're gonna like experience or get known by yourself. Even if you do the tutorials, later on you will realize that the tutorials are just like the 20% of it. Even if it goes through all the objects or whatever, but how do you combine these is the point of it, I think. And that's where the problems occur or the mistakes occur.
right.
And then that's the situation when you learn, when you make, and then that takes time, a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes. And so if I look back, of course, I would say if from the first day I would know how the ZL objects work, I would have spare a lot of time probably. But yeah, I think it's people usually say that there should not be a goal, but there's a path. So just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you there. Like, you can take a course, and I definitely would encourage people if they have the means to take a course in Max to have a mentor to even get some one-on-one instruction, because that can really help you advance very quickly. But just like anything, just like trying to go out and run a marathon without having done any training, it's going to be very, very, very difficult. And Max, and like an instrument too, Max, like if you just do a little bit of patching each day, it's like these incremental gains, and then you can do the big patch and you can run the marathon. And yeah, it's interesting. It really adds up, like accumulative knowledge. Yeah, Gabor, this has been excellent, folks. We're gonna wrap it up here. Gabor, thank you for spending this time with us. It's been awesome. Uh, we're all, and I think I can speak for the audience here. We're all very excited for your album. And we've already talked about this, but when it comes out, we'll have to have you back to talk about it a bit more. Yeah, we're all looking forward. Do you know the actual release date for it?
As far as I know, it's 6th September.
6th of September, folks. Put that September, late summer. We're gonna have to wait until then. Yeah. Someone says, Gabor, we need a black metal Max album. So maybe that could be. There's an idea.
That's true. I agree.
He agrees. All right, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It's been great. Excellent audience here, and we'll see you soon for the next Discord. All right, folks. Bye.
Bye.